Good morning. Better? Okay, I think it's going to work.
Working.
All right.
Heat wave here.
How's that? No. Good morning. Good morning. I'm Kathy Boffman-McLeod. I'm the director of the Adrienne Arsht Rockefeller Foundation Resilience Center at the Atlantic Council. Thank you for joining us for this exciting announcement. We at Arsht Rock are focused on building resilience to climate impacts for people and communities all over the world. One of the most impactful and lethal effects of climate change is extreme heat. And extreme heat is killing more people than any other climate-driven hazard. And so as we gather here today in Sharm el-Sheikh to reduce our emissions, to stop climate change, while we're doing that, we must adapt. We are adapting, but we must protect people and economies and livelihoods from this risk and hazard we don't fully understand. We have been talking about global warming for 40 years, but we are not talking about heat. And heat cost the US economy in one dimension alone, in 2020, $100 billion. And that is to the worker and to the economy. And it disproportionately affects Black and Hispanic workers in the US. And we conducted the same analysis in the Global South and the Global North and found very similar results. Big chunks of economic growth are being stunted by heat. We don't have the data we need. We don't have the finance we need. But first, we need awareness. And so let me just quickly ask, how many people here have had their plans or something that they were doing recently, like maybe even in the last half hour, affected by heat?
Well, right now?
Right now. Right now. And so what we need, now you're experiencing it, but do you think of it in the same way that you think of a flood or a fire? And no, we don't, because it's silent and invisible. And so what we need is awareness. And that is the first step. And so we need voices sharing and scaling the solutions for heat. And we need global voices. And so while we have appointed chief heat officers, we have a UN Habitat chief heat officer in Lenyo Miravilli. We have mayors who have joined us as city champions for heat action. Today, I am so proud to announce a new global voice, our new global ambassador for heat action, former President Felipe Calderon, a statesman, a climate leader, and now on our team to share the threat and the solutions of extreme heat, to bring this awareness to his network and understanding of how multilateral institutions and governments work. And we are out of time. And so we need every voice, and this voice today is one of the most exciting, and we are so delighted to have you here. Thank you very much. Thank you for your partnership. Thank you. So let me turn this over to my colleague, Mauricio Rodas, our heat advisor for city diplomacy and the former mayor of Quito, Ecuador. Over to you.
Thank you, Kathy. Well, I have the pleasure of knowing President Calderon for many years now, and now I have the pleasure to introduce to you someone who doesn't need any kind of introduction, but let me tell you a little bit about his great trajectory. So President Calderon was the 61st president of Mexico between 2006 and 2012. During his term, he was the first Latin American president to become the chair of the G20 group. He also chaired COP16 in Cancun, a COP that, among other things, is remembered because it encouraged greater participation from local governments and civil society. President Calderon has been named the Statesman of the Year by the World Economic Forum, and the UN named him the Champion of the Earth, among many other very important recognitions for his climate leadership. He has led the new climate economy project. He is now the president of the Environmental and Sustainability Commission of the International Automobile Federation, and he's the founder and president of the Foundation for Social and Sustainable Development, through which he's fostering low carbon development around the world. We're thrilled at Arsht for having President Calderon undertaking this new role as a new voice to keep fostering the extreme heat agenda among global leaders, among stakeholders to undertake action to protect people, the economy, jobs around the world from extreme heat-related risks. We are thrilled at Arsht to announce President Felipe Calderon as our first ambassador for heat action.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure.
Gracias. Thank you, Terry. Thank you. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Kathy. Thank you, Mauricio. Thank you to the center, the Arsht Center, Resilience Center, and all the people that invited me to work together in this marvelous endeavor. And I need to confess that I was not aware about the size of the problem. I used to talk about the horrors of climate change and its devastating consequences. I remember mentioning that after one typhoon in 2014, more than 4,000 people died. And it looks to me that it was an incredible figure. However, reading much deeper about my new task, I discovered incredible comments, as you already mentioned, Kathy. You know that, for instance, The Lancet published a report, a research, only upon 9 countries, including Mexico, and I take the opportunity to say hello to my fellow Mexican citizen, the Mayor Colosio, who is already working in his social nets. Hi, Luis Donaldo, how are you? The Mayor of Freetown, it's a pleasure, Madam. But including, I would say, the research about heat waves over 9 countries only demonstrated that heat waves caused 356,000 casualties only in 2018. So by far, heat waves is the killer, and as the center says, the silent killer. And what is it's silent because we are unaware of that. We cannot see the waves, the heat waves. We cannot see the fire, like the forest fires. We cannot see the floods, the water in the floods. However, it's killing more people than any other extreme weather events combined. So I would say heat waves is the extreme of the extreme weather events. So it's a pleasure for me to work on that because I'm contemplating the devastating consequences of that. And now that we are talking about fair transition, just transition, it is incredible how heat waves is affecting the most vulnerable people. I remember clearly the image of a street sweeper in Madrid this summer. He just was unable to walk, seated down on the sidewalk and died. He passed away. And like him, thousands people, elderly people, and not only in very remote, far remote and very poor countries. In Europe, 2003, the heat waves, more than 10,000 people died in the summer, especially elderly people alone in their apartments with no one else supporting him. So the problem is real. And at the same time, I see that we can do a lot of things for combine these very important adaptation necessities with mitigation forces. In particular, for instance, nature-based solution. Trees able to moderate the extreme heat in the cities, another that I don't want to mention to take much more time, but thank you for inviting me. I know that the main task is to create awareness. The main task is to end with this silence part of the silent killer. And I invite all of you to work together, go out of here and say, this is the enemy, or is one of the most dangerous enemies we need to fight against him. And I will do that with all my heart. And thank you for inviting me, Mauricio, Kathy. Thank you very much.
Thank you again,
Thank you.
Mr. President. Thank you. So we are going to quickly transition to our next event. We are excited to announce another aspect of addressing extreme heat. Welcome to the Cool Capital Stack, investing in a world safe from heat. Again, I'll tell you again because I think we have some new guests. My name is Kathy Boffman-McLeod. I am the Director and Senior Vice President at the Arsht Rock Resilience Center at the Atlantic Council. And our center is dedicated to building resilience to climate impacts for people and communities around the world. We've set a goal of reaching 1 billion people with resilience solutions. One of our primary focal areas is extreme heat. And in 2019, thanks to the Rockefeller Foundation, we hosted a 3-day convening around extreme heat. We understood as a new center that we had something to bring in terms of the capacity and the technical expertise and experience of a team that understands climate adaptation and climate adaptation finance. But what we also learned is that heat, this silent killer that we've just heard about, has no governance. It doesn't have a name. It doesn't have a season. It doesn't have financing. It doesn't have awareness. And so we set about an agenda to build awareness, to identify policies and interventions that work. That awareness has, in the last year, turned into a first named heat wave in Seville based on a health-based heat ranking system. We're really proud to have made a major contribution to a piece of legislation in California that now covers 40 million people who will be under a health-based ranking system for heat waves. And we then said we need people governance around this. We appointed the first chief heat officer in Miami. We've since announced 8 chief heat officers around the world and one now at UN Habitat. We assessed the cost of heat to the economy. That is in worker productivity losses. And now, what is the natural next step? What if we have a heat action platform named and categorized heat waves, chief heat officers, a heat season in Miami-Dade County, and scaling all of this? What do you need? You need money. We need money. We need adaptation finance desperately, and this new pipeline of projects that cool and protect people and communities, the Cool Capital Stack, serves to accelerate climate adaptation financing and cool and protect communities and local economies. And so we are excited to announce a pipeline of cooling projects of $750 million. It's just step one. And we have today some exciting speakers and to announce support we have for the portfolio, the beneficiaries of the portfolio, lots of partners. And so let us crack on. I want to say we will have an investor conference before the end of the year. We will be putting out an LOI to understand more about who's interested in the portfolio. It's just the beginning, and it cannot happen fast enough. We are out of time and people are dying. And at the same time, it's an opportunity. Technologies are being born every day that protect people. And we have investment in nature, which we know is the most cost effective, and yet we're not doing enough of it. We need more data. We know that cool roofs and green roofs and cool flat white surfaces, cooler surfaces, all of those things are contributing to protection of people, and those benefits can be monetized. There are returns. We've partnered with a water utility company. Water is essential for cooling. So exciting to have a solution set, a dollar amount, and we are ready for investors, funders, and what this capital stack means is not your traditional capital stack. It's not just debt and equity. It's everything in the whole continuum of finance. Philanthropy, blended capital, impact investment, social impact bonds, parametric insurance, love insurance to finance climate adaptation, more about that soon, and commercial capital, all of it. And so we're going to explore it all, and let's get into hearing from our speakers. our first speaker, and I think everybody is here. Our first speaker is Ashvin Dayal. And Ashvin, let me just say thank you from Arsht for the support, the moral support, the technical support, and also your support for our work at the Rockefeller Foundation. So please come on up and give us a word. Thank you. And so I'm going to call each speaker up quickly, and we'll sit down, and we'll come back up for a photo. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you, Kathy. Mr. President, thank you so much for taking on this role of being a champion and a voice for the issue. I think I'll just stand if that's okay. So firstly, just to say that the foundation is extremely honored to be involved with the launch of the Cool Capital Stack. It's part of a multi-year effort of partnering with the Arsht Center to continue to find the most innovative, necessary solutions to address the climate crisis and to build resilience of communities and individuals and households and entire regions, in fact. I think, as a foundation, we actually just recently committed ourselves not only to build on the work that we're doing in renewable energy, but to more widely expand our focus on addressing the climate crisis and really to kind of address the entire assets of the foundation in the coming years to that, both on the mitigation side as well as on the adaptation question, because obviously we need to be working on both fronts. So when Kathy and I have been talking about the issue of heat, it's an issue that has been building up. It's sort of a perverse and cruel twist of fate in some ways that the issue that is now one of the most pressing adaptation challenges also has some mitigation risks. If you think about a cool capital stack and the cooling solutions, there was a lot of talk this summer after we saw the heat waves in various parts of the world, including in my country, India, about air conditioning as a human right, cooling as a human right. So when we look beyond nature-based solutions and we look at passive cooling and housing, you start to get to the question of engineered cooling, right? Air conditioning. 900 million Indians this summer, 900 million out of 1.3 billion, faced temperatures of over 40 degrees centigrade. I'm sorry, I don't do Fahrenheit. For 15 consecutive days. So when we talk about heat stress, it's not just the peak of one day, it's that sustained impact and what that does to individuals, to their worker productivity, what that's doing to farming and agricultural systems, what that's doing to buildings, what that's doing to individual human health. It just cuts across every facet of economic and social life. So for us, the launch of the Cool Capital Stack is really a very natural evolution of the expertise that the center has built up over several years. I think the work that we've also been doing in parallel on Global Energy Alliance for People and Planet, trying to look at how do we deploy renewables to be part of this solution. We've been having really interesting conversations with air conditioning manufacturers, for example. How do you bring super efficient air conditioning into markets, but how do you do it so that they're being powered by renewable energy so that we're not making the crisis worse even as we try to adapt? So really excited to be a supporter of the Cool Capital Stack and look forward to hearing from others and just ready to get going on this question. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashvin. And now I would like to say a big thanks to JPMorgan Chase for their support of this project. We have the great privilege to have been building this capital stack and the concept and collecting the projects over the last several months. And we are excited about all aspects of the capital stack, including the active and the passive cooling aspects. And so let me hand it over to Chuka Umuna to come on up and tell us a little bit about, from the perspective of JPMorgan Chase, and I say thank you again. And we're going to change the format. I'm just going to sit here, and you will stand.
Well, thank you very much for asking us just to say something. I was just going to say something very quickly about JPMorgan, our clients, and then this adaptation issue. And the first is just look, on the bank, the biggest bank by market cap in the world, 270,000 employees, tens of millions of individual customers and companies. this issue that we're talking about here at COP has a direct impact on all of them. And we wouldn't be doing our job for our clients and our customers unless we were basically putting the full force of our capital, our advisory, our data, and our research to the wheel to help address this issue. And that is one of the reasons why we have made a commitment to finance and facilitate $2.5 trillion going through to 2030 from 2021 to help deliver against the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and $1 trillion of that is dedicated towards climate. Now, last year, just to put in context what we've done, we helped push $106 billion towards the climate issue, but there is so much more that needs to be done on this. My day job is as an investment banker, so I advise clients on what investors expect from a sustainability and ESG perspective and help them access ESG and sustainable focused capital. And one of the reasons we are so pleased to be backing the Cool Capital stack and the work that Arsht is doing is because this issue of adaptation needs a whole lot more attention than it is already getting at the moment. And I mean, people feel this. You can probably tell from my accent. I'm a Brit. I'm from London. We had 40 degrees C heat in London this year. Now, it's raining and it's cloudy right now, so to some extent people celebrate that. But it's actually quite horrifying when you consider how out of the norm that is. I can tell you something, though, that in the discussions that we have with investors, and I speak to investors all the time, not just ESG and sustainable focused capital, but vanilla investors, very rarely is this issue of adaptation mentioned. It has simply not been priced into valuations that we're seeing at the moment. Often you get a knee-jerk reaction after a climate-driven disaster event, like the likes of what we've seen in Pakistan, for example, a third of a whole country underwater. Extraordinary. You often get a reaction after the event, but in terms of the extent to which our corporate clients have been grilled on how they're preparing for the adaptation that is needed for the damage that has already been done, aside from the mitigation, it is just not figuring so strongly in the conversation. And for me, that underlines why this is such an important project, and it's why at JPMorgan we're so pleased to be involved with it, and all power to your elbow. Thanks for having us to speak.
Thank you very much, Chuka. I think this year ahead that will change, and we'll more deeply understand how supply chains and workforce impacts will be a part of that. So thank you again for your support, and this is just the beginning. So next, let me ask Helen Mountford to come up from Climate Works Foundation and from the Clean Cooling Collaborative. We're delighted to have support from you and the technical advice from your wonderful team. So over to you, Helen. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kathy, and wonderful to be here and to see the launch of the Cool Capital Stack. This is so important, as others have said. From Climate Works side, what we're doing is working with all of climate philanthropy, which is small but mighty, to actually use our philanthropic funds better to invest in the kinds of solutions that can leverage public and private funds that can actually drive change. And so really excited to be a part of this. The Clean Cooling Collaborative that we're running is looking for these kinds of solutions. And we know that at the moment, cooling is creating a vicious cycle. The need for cooling is creating a vicious cycle in the climate. It does, as we see these heat waves hit, it drives more demand for air conditioning, often powered by fossil fuels, which leads to more emissions, and then we've got a vicious cycle. And we need to look for the solutions. And what we're looking at is how can we actually get passive cooling, which will actually protect people from these heat waves, but also reduce for demand for air conditioning, such as reflective roofs, other solutions. How can we also drive much more efficient air conditioning systems, which won't contribute to furthering the problems? But the main focus is really how do we actually get these solutions to people on the ground in a way that helps the 1.2 billion people who now are at risk from extreme heat. and most of those are the most vulnerable and low income. So how do we get those solutions on the ground rapidly, and looking at something like the Cool Capital Stack that can really bring the finance needed to the table to accelerate where we've got some of the solutions is really exciting. So thank you. Wonderful to be a part of this.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. One of the things that I meant to mention in terms of the focal point of the Cool Capital Stack is that as heat is a social and equity and environmental and climate infrastructure crisis, and again, I want to focus on solutions because there's opportunity, but prioritizing women and girls in the investment of the Cool Capital Stack is good for local economies, and it's good for health and prosperity in the community. And so I want to note that's a really important part for us. And so next, now we're going to turn to our wonderful partner, Mayor Yvonne Aki-Sawyer from Freetown, the Tree Town, Sierra Leone. Come on up, Mayor, and give us a flavor for what's happening.
Thanks, Kathy. It's a real pleasure to be here. We've heard so much from finance, from Rockefeller, from the president, and from the introduction from Mauricio and Kathy. And your comments were really, really insightful in terms of where you want to go. What I want to say is what's actually happening today. And what's happening today is that temperature increases, London 40 degrees, one off. In a place like Freetown, we are feeling the impact of climate change and this extreme heat. Like many others, it has been silent to us. You don't actually make the connections if you don't have the data. So we're pleased to be one of the cities which, through the support of Arsht, was able to appoint a chief heat officer last year. First one in Africa, and people keep saying to me, why? The why is because we need the focus. We need the data. We need to understand that we're living with heat. We're a tropical country. Everybody expects heat. But I know, and people selling in the marketplace and little children going to school know that the heat is different. People just say it feels different. It feels hotter. And the impact is actually life-threatening because we're in a community where access to water is challenged. And one of the biggest and most immediate impacts of extreme heat, you being a market woman and selling under the sun all day long, is that if that thirst is not quenched, it actually impacts your kidneys. And before you know it, you've got health conditions which you're not aware of. And we often hear people say, oh, she felt bad and she died. And beneath those deaths, there's a need for more data, but there's a need for protection. So what we're doing in the face of this extreme heat, with the support of Arsht, is not only appointing a chief heat officer, but beginning to take practical steps to protect some of our most vulnerable, women and girls, market traders, from heat. I was really excited the other day. I was able at 10 o'clock at night, because they're working at night, the team are working at night, to go to a market where we're erecting heat market shade covers. Very practical, very simple. They've got metal frames, heat-resistant canopies with solar lights beneath them. The excitement generated by that was worth it, but actually the health consequences that will result, the saving of lives, will be even more worth it. But what's our big challenge? We were only able to impact 3 markets, and even with those 3, only partially, because climate action boils down to money, and there just is not enough of it flowing to the global south, flowing to where it's needed most. I've been mayor for almost 5 years. I ran for mayor because of climate. I come from the private sector. This was an intervention. My stepping into politics was purely to respond to the climate crisis in my city. 5 years on, with all of that political will and a very strong team, we have not yet accessed $5 million. We have commitments, but no disbursement. Well, some disbursement, maybe about $1.5 million. But to me, that speaks a story. It tells us that the difference between the rhetoric and the reality is huge. And it's got to change, and that gap has to close. Not only in respect of heat, but in respect of climate action generally. But heat is obviously a very big part of that. So at this COP of implementation, we have to think outside the box. I appreciate that my city doesn't have a credit rating. I appreciate that my city has challenges in terms of risk perception for private sector. But I also appreciate that this crisis is not limited. There's no gap between those with credit ratings and those without. The problem is universal. The solution needs to be universal. Financing needs to flow. We've got to find ways of mitigating and risk managing that risk. Blended finance is obviously a part of the story, and it's a nice word. And we do have blended finance, but it's too little and it's too slow. So that's my message here on the heat. We're also planting 1 million trees. Freetown, the tree town. We started it 2 years ago. The plan was to plant 1 million within 2 years. Heat is also mitigated by nature-based solutions. Planting trees makes your city cooler, but we'll be at 800 by December. The sad part of that is that there are more trees being cut down because 82% of my residents still use coal or wood for cooking. So we need investment in alternative cooking fuels. We need investment in infrastructure. We need investment in nature-based solutions. What Arsht is doing today with the Cool Capital Stack is hugely exciting. But let this be the different element of the climate response. Let the Cool Capital Stack be the one that actually moves the money fast and moves it to the places where it needs to go to. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Woo! Yes, you! Yes. Oh my goodness. Woo! That is inspiring. Thank you very much. And I just want you to know, we purposefully made the room this temperature so that everyone could feel the heat. So another one of our city champions for heat action is Mayor Luis Colosio from Monterrey, Mexico. Mayor, please. Woo-woo!
Thank you, and good morning still, thank you. Yeah, hello to all. And I'm very excited to be here because this sort of collaboration is exactly the things that we need to push things forward in a much, much faster way. The amount of collaboration and cooperation that we're experiencing through this project, through the Cool Capital Stack, is paramount but also unprecedented. Because the rate at which sub-national governments can access not just public but especially private finance is severely limited at this time. And it's one of the greatest challenges and impediments that we've had as cities for as long as we've been cities. Monterrey is the capital city of the state of Nuevo León, which is at the northernmost part of Mexico. And it's a city, like many other cities, with very poor design, with an urban sprawl that was left unchecked, untethered, and therefore completely in disarray. And not only that, 60% of our population live in the northeastern part of the city, which is ironically the part of the city which has the least amount of trees and green areas of practically the whole metro area. That has got to stop. Therefore, we are implementing, since last year, a system for urban parks and green corridors in order to connect different key points of the city with a major reforestation effort in order to cool down the microclimates that we have in different parts of the city. This is a joint effort not only to have reforestation, which is a nature-based solution to bring down the temperature, but it's also in an effort to rejuvenate and recuperate the public spaces that dignify the city and dignify the lives of our citizens, especially those people in the most disarray, which, ironically, are the people that live in this part of the city. This system of urban parks and green corridors seeks to connect different parts of our city to other parts of the city in order to improve sustainable mobility. These green corridors are for walking, are for cycling, and that's it. because we cannot continue to hold public infrastructure design centered around the automobile. That has been the key mistake of our era in question of urban design. Yes, you may clap. So with this project, we're striving is not only to implement it in the city of Monterrey, but through the collaboration of the whole metro area, we've convinced and brought on board different mayors of other cities in the metropolitan area to scale up this project to a metropolitan system of green corridors, which is also unprecedented in not only the size of the project, but also the amount of collaboration that, well, politically is not easy in Monterrey or in Mexico, and former President Calderon knows this very well. He knows that politicians are not prone to collaborate with the opposition. And this is also something that excites me, because the level of solidarity that we're seeing is something that really, really, it brings joy to my heart. But we cannot do it alone. We need friends and allies. And we need initiatives like Arsht to support, not only economically, but also technically. Because these sorts of projects, when affected in an effective manner, ensure that the different stakeholders that approach the project and execute the project enable this to be effective through time, across multiple administrations, because that is also a key challenge in a city. Administrations are very short-sighted, and they're very politically and electorally driven. And we need to see past elections, we need to see past administrations, and we need to see past personal political projects that must never tie a social project and a city construction to a political agenda. So that is what we are implementing, and I am very grateful to all our sponsors and partners in this tremendous project that will help millions of lives, not only in Monterrey, but across the globe. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. So now I'd like to turn to our partner, Francis Bouchard from Marsh McLennan Companies. A wonderful partner, and as I said, there will be some exciting risk transfer and parametric elements to the capital stack. Over to you, Francis.
Can I stand right over here? Oh, you guys have it good over here. You don't know. Why don't we switch everybody here? All right, sorry. Francis Bouchard, Marsh McLennan. I'm also a fellow at the Resilience Center. And when Kathy first came to us with this concept of the cool capital stack, it really was a bit of a challenge, because insurance, President Calderon said it right, it's a silent killer. Extreme heat is, not insurance. But it's not really a typically insured peril. So we went to our modelers and our underwriters and said, look, can we start having this conversation? They said, well, what data are we going to use? Are we going to use daytime temperatures, nighttime temperatures, 1 day, 2 day, 3 day? It really started a discussion with our technical experts about what would be needed to actually create an insurance product around heat. And I think that's going to help accelerate this if we can figure that out. Now, what it also started to do is they realized that, wait, buying insurance for this is really almost an extreme event situation. So the stacking concept of the cool capital stack really started to challenge us, and we're now in the early stage conversations around two different approaches of trying to use a common parametric trigger. So, third-party, identifiable, reliable, verifiable, trustworthy indications of heat, but actually use it to trigger different forms of capital: humanitarian capital, philanthropic capital, low-income capital, and then obviously insurance at the top. So we think it's a really innovative approach. Like I said, we've got a few different examples within the Cool Capital Stack operations where we're trying to do it. And we look forward to partnering with not just Arsht, but the other capital providers to really find a way where we can get the right dollars into the right hands at the right time and not just wait till after the event. And there's another project we're working on with Arsht, which will try to raise that topic in a more concerted or broader way, trying to bring the insurance industry to look much closer at pre-event risk reduction. This is a great example of it, and we're going to try to extend it to other risks as well. So thank you, Kathy.
Thank you very much. And so is Vivek here? Has he made it from IFC? Doesn't look like it. Okay. Moving on. Okay, so I am very excited to introduce Bijal Brahmbhatt. She is the director at Mahila Housing Trust. She represents an organization that is a member of the Extreme Heat Resilience Alliance, and they have been looking at heat for decades and understanding the financial impacts, and so lots of innovation at Mahila Housing Trust. We're delighted to have you as our partner. Over to you, Bijal, and we've never met in person. Hi. Okay, over to you.
Thank you for inviting me, Kathy, and I'm really excited. But today I also go back down the memory lane when, through the Rockefeller Foundation, we had won a challenge with the Global Resilience Partnership. And we started working with poor women in informal sector, women and girls, on issues of heat through that program. And now we've come a full circle now. To be a partner with Arsht Rockefeller, and I'm really, really excited. So what my organization does is across India, we work mostly in urban areas, organizing poor women and girls to work on urban development and habitat development issues, through which we started looking at heat, because for most of our women members, heat is a big, big issue. Productivity is a big issue, and that's how we started working. And they all started demanding cool roofs. And we partnered with tech solutions, market drivers on cool roofs, green roofs, etc. And interestingly enough, cities in India, in my country, at that point in time, were starting to have heat action plans. But most of those heat action plans are currently also limited to early warning systems and hospital readiness. And it was our women groups who actually talked to the government to bring in a cool roof element. From there now we have expanded. Imagine our country, India, is now having a big 20 million housing program for affordable, for the low income. It's called the Affordable Housing Program, Housing Mission. And the moment we saw our women were moving in there, their electricity bills were just doubling because it did not offer any thermal comfort and, take care of the heat which was being generated. And so how do you really influence such huge infrastructure which is being generated in Indian cities, even for the poor, to become more heat resistant? So we realized, and we realized that there is much more opportunity in the smaller cities across India, because smaller cities, one, they don't have the technical capacity. Secondly, they don't have these innovative ideas and funding for that, and they are really ready to listen to you. So from now, merely being as recipients, my challenge is that how do we and our women really lead these socio-technical processes at the city level? Because if you talk of heat, it has to look at cooling, it has to look at greening in your master plans, it has to look at the blue infrastructure, and most of all, how does it generate jobs for the poor and women and improve their quality of life? And, my country recently, for the first time, recognized urban poverty and announced, urban employment guarantee program in one of the provinces. And I'm wondering how it can be linked with, urban infrastructure development and heat reduction and jobs generation. So I'm really excited that the cooling capital stack will look at a variety of issues, and not only cooling, because it's all integrated. I'm also very excited because already Kathy has helped us put in touch with Francis. We have started working on heat insurance along with excessive rain insurance for our women. And we just found out that from an income of $295, our women were spending $70 on an average over the 4 months. That's a short season. 4 months is technically not 4 months in India. It expands to 8 months. But over a 4-month period, they were spending around $70 and that's a combination of income loss due to heat and also, repairing their housing and their workplaces to make it heat ready. So that's a huge thing for a small income. That's what is really driving us, and I'm really hoping. Okay, and one challenge to your heat officers, I know because I've been trying to work with them, is that at least in India, the heat officers are all pure doctors. So they don't recognize public health issues. So the reason of cooling not being as a part of the heat action plans was that it was all being driven by doctors only. So how do you bring in, urban planners? How do you bring in the informal sector, other social aspects to make it much more vibrant? So the first caution would be not to appoint a chief heat officer, at least in India, to be a doctor. Because their main task is to coordinate with all the departments at the city level. And I don't think that they realize that at all. So now having said that, I'm really excited, Kathy, because in the city of Jodhpur, in fact, they have invited us to develop the city heat action plan. And someone would say that, are we going away from our targets? But no, what we want to really do is not include the poor and women as symbolic, but we really want them to take the lead to do a city-level plan and co-create it with the city. And I'm really looking forward to work with you all and with Francis on the insurance, hopefully. Let's see. Thank you so much.
So one of the technologies I mentioned will be clothing that is cooler. And so we'll also change our standards. We won't expect you to wear a blazer. And so I'm giving you free license right now, if you're wearing a blazer, to take the blazer off if you want to. Personal choice. The fans over here and a lot of blazers are over here. So I'm not sure if it goes together. Thank you. This is the future. This is the future. That's leadership, Francis. So, yes. So now, speaking of chief heat officers, next we have Lenyo Miravilli, who began her heat career as the chief heat officer of Athens, and we still continue to work closely with Kostas Bakoyannis, the mayor there, and now she's been co-appointed by Arsht and by UN Habitat as the chief heat officer for UN Habitat. Lots of great things ahead, but some perspective from your view from the globe and from the ground. Over to you.
Hi, thanks, Kathy. Not a doctor, an anthropologist, and I was elected in city government, and I've been working in the city of Athens for years and years, but also in city networks, and I know how difficult it is for cities to fund especially nature-based solutions, blue and green infrastructure, which we know is really, really, really important right now for dealing with climate change and especially with rising heat. As I'm stepping up to the role of Global Chief Heat Officer for the UN Habitat, I've been studying what the UN Habitat has been doing. It's working in almost a couple of hundred cities around the world, focusing on housing, focusing on informal housing, on water, on energy. I mean, a lot of different programs on mobility, et cetera, and trying to fold in the climate perspective and work more and more on issues that have to do with climate mitigation and resilience. It's very clear that resources are very tight, very, very small budgets, and the need is rising. We know that today we have about 350 cities, big cities around the world that are facing temperatures above 35 degrees Celsius. I don't know Fahrenheit either. 350 cities, right? Big cities around the world that are dealing with these crazy temperatures that are that our human bodies and our cities are not made for. By 2050, we know that it's going to be 1,000 cities that are going to, people that are living are going to be dealing with extraordinary temperatures, and it's going to be about 1.5 1.6 billion people that are going to be struggling with survival in relation to extreme heat. And we know from the UN Habitat that we have, over 1 billion people living in informal settlements. I mean, this is like, just try to think about what it means to be dealing with extreme heat. As Bijal has been dealing with this for a long time. But what we really need, and Secretary General Guterres called for it, is funding for adaptation, and we need accelerated funding for adaptation now. It's an urgency, and this is, I hope my role will be help with raising the urgency in this issue within the UN system, starting from the habitat, human settlements. So this capital stack is the type, fits right in. It's the type of innovative thinking of bringing a variety of different kind of types of funding with new ways of trying to combine them and to diversify risk so that cities can actually benefit from these types for funding. And thank you, and I hope it really goes fast, as Yvonne said, and really big. Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you very much, Lenyo. So, thank you. Bye. So, just a reiteration, the stack has now 7 cities and some technologies in it, and we're just getting started, but we've got about $750 million worth of projects in the pipeline. We are going to be learning more and more about scoping the returns. We've partnered with Dahlberg advisors to help us discern the landscape of investors and estimate the returns for investors. And so I would like to, as we are wrapping up and we will all go and cool off, invite our new global ambassador for heat action, former President Felipe Calderon, to come up for a quick closing word. And then we're going to come up, take your questions, quick photo, cool off. Here we go.
Thank you. Well, thank you. Well, I started with my tie. It's the beginning, but maybe we can organize a party later on to take off the clothes. Not all, just the jacket, but I'm very timid about it. Huh? Well, sorry for that comment. You can erase that for the screen. So I was a politician, so. Well, I'm sorry if I could not take note of the names of all of you, but briefly, some comments that caught my attention. One is Ashwin was mentioning incredible data about Indian people. So 15 days living in a 40 Celsius or above 40 Celsius, which is not living, is surviving really with a lot of unintended consequences that we are unable now to estimate properly. Then Chuka, whatever, from JPMorgan was talking about very important issue that we need to take into account, that adaptation projects are now excluded of monetization, are not excluded from capitalizations, and probably this project could overcome that situation. So very important, and that is crucial because it's going to be impossible to address adaptations in the right manner if we are unable to mobilize the interest of the people looking for money, putting money, looking for money, to be honest. And it's trying to avoid any moral judgment about that, but that's the reality. The financial system used to work like that. I hope we can change that in some time, but not very sure. So in that sense, this capital stack is quite important to move forward, and it's a very important initiative, in my opinion. Helen Mumford, dear. How are you, Helen? Oh? How is everything over there? Oh? Always very smart climate economist and global economist as well, putting the point about the vicious circle about air conditioning. Oh? Heat waves, more air conditioning demand, more fossil fuels burned, more emissions, more climate change. So how to break that? And that's important because one of the solutions needs to be with philanthropic aspects about providing energy and air conditioning to the people actually have not. But also how to transform renewable energy in better conditions to tackle heat waves. So quite important point. Mayor Sawyer, it's an incredible point about the real stories about real people in marginalized, poor countries that we cannot imagine the reality in which, for cooking, you need to use coal or charcoal or the trees, la madera, so wood, and that's a reality. And this is causing not only high pollution that is impossible to revert if we do not change that technology for cooking, but also is creating an incredible number of premature disease, cancer in the lungs for the woman cooking, respiratory disease, and on. So we need to change that. And that everything is connected, connecting all the dots related with poverty, climate change, pollution, technology, and development, marginalized people is quite important. So the effort that the mayor is doing is not corresponded by now by the global community. I love this expression, commitments, but not disbursements. So commitment, but not financial support, and we need to break down that reality. Mayor Colosio was talking about quite interesting project connecting urban and suburban areas of those, that big metropolitan city, which is Monterrey, where probably the richest people in Latin America live, but also a lot of marginalized, very extreme poor people. And it is important to do massive actions to help the people to live with extreme weather events. Actually, Monterrey and the state of Nuevo León suffered this summer the worst drought probably in 50 years with an incredible scarcity of drinking water. And that happened in North America with incredible weather events, with the worst heat waves, and the same in Europe, the same that you mentioned in the UK, in London. It is curious, but the very difference is in London having the economic chances to have air conditioning. They don't use that, so that's a good experiment next time. But that's the reality for a lot of people unable to buy air conditioning everywhere or in developing countries. So we need to be friends and allies. I agree with that, and probably it's the most questioning problem we are having in this polarized world in which we are facing the problem and we are exacerbating polarization and unable to work together. I talk about climate change that we are like in a plane, no? That is going to crash. Something is happening with the pilot or whatever, and we are fighting each other, no? In the cabin, in the coach cabin against business class, and everybody is throwing out the seats and so on. And we need to save the plane. That's the whole idea about cooperation. So Francis, Marsh McLennan, quite important, and congratulations for your cooperation with the project. It is important, and I suffered as president this weather condition. For instance, the insurance companies didn't want to establish affordable insurance for instance, highways, because the number of natural disasters we were suffering each year after year was skyrocketing, hurricanes. And nobody wanted to insure that. So we need to design new financial models for insurance companies, insurance industry. Probably I'm wrong, but maybe the most interested industry in the world is financial, and it's insurance financial industry, to design the right models to tackle this problem and to understand that adaptation is also a financial problem for all. Sorry for my pronunciation, Bamblad, Vijay, talking about the big element of this era, which is empowering women and girls, empowering the leadership that the lack of leadership we are living today will be disappear, in my opinion, when we learn to empower women and girls. And I think that is going to happen with the Prince of Chi and the mayor here. We have a problem we have a problem with the hospitals and systems. Yes, they are getting system for heat waves, but not the rest of the people. Well, I lost some comments, but I think I need to go here and open the floor for questions and points for the participants, or what is the idea? I lost that part.
We are going to forego the questions. I'm sorry, but we are all going to have to get out because it's so hot. Before we do that, though, thank you very much. We are so delighted, so delighted. Thank you very much. Thank you. But before we do that, we have very brief remarks from Vivek Pathak from the International Finance Corporation, with whom we are exploring a partnership on the Cool Capital Stack, for just a quick word, and then we'll do a group photo, and you can all get back to a cool temperature. Over to you, Vivek. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Kathy, and I sincerely apologize for being late. The reason was I was at a very important panel for blended finance. And I think blended finance is really critical for what we're trying to do in cooling. I keep calling cooling, the new word I have for it is actually the unsung hero of climate, because it's largely been ignored, but it's critical, as we know, for adaptation, like you just said, equally important for mitigation. But what we need to make it happen, and our job is to how do you attract commercial capital into this space, and for that we need blended finance. So we're working on different models, but I think what's critical is that we get an early engagement, especially when new large real estate developments are happening or new cities are being developed. So in short, I know we're running out of time, but I would just say, we need three things. We need blended finance, blended finance, blended finance to make this happen. And that's how we're going to get our friends from Wall Street to come into this. So that's really what we should work towards. Thank you very much, Kathy, for giving me a chance.
Thank you all for bearing with the temperatures. The Cool Capital Stack is officially launched, and may we be on our way. We'll be coming back with the investor conference. Let me say thank you again to the Rockefeller Foundation and to Adrienne Arsht for their support for our work, and especially to JPMorgan Chase for this project and for the partnership we've had. It's been a delight, and it's just getting started. So thank you all very much, and if the speakers would come to the front. Thank you.
And I hope this time is gone.